Norman Osborn, aka the Green Goblin, has been an integral part of the Spider-Man mythos since his first appearance in the Amazing Spider-Man issue number 38. Norman has been the arch-nemesis to Peter Parker as the Green Goblin, and has been the arch-nemesis to, obviously, Spider-Man. This character alone, I could make an entire video essay regarding his importance to the story of Spider-Man, and how much his rivalry towards Spidey in and out of the red and blue spandex brings to a grand narrative of this character. The stories that he provides are intriguing and thought-filling. You see, Norman Osborn takes up the very cliche, very boring, mundane, and almost monotonal businessman that you see in fiction. He has all the characteristics. He is laid back, confident, rich, doesn't spend enough time with his family because he's too concentrated on business, etc. But not all is what it meets the eye with Norman. His character alone subverts expectations. He's always one step ahead of the webhead. But that's just Norman alone, not regarding the Spectacular Spider-Man version of the character, which is not only absolutely terrifying in and out of the suit, but subverts expectations more than any other version of the character ever did before. Norman Osborn has always been the Green Goblin, so how could you subvert an expectation about a character that was already confirmed by other previous media? It's almost like saying you are surprised that Darth Vader is Luke's father, even though you know he's Anakin Skywalker. How is this possible? Well, I can tell you Norman Osborn is one of the cleverest crafted big bad supervillains in a Spider-Man TV show to date. This character was set up over 2 seasons, introducing us to the menacing Green Goblin in the Halloween episode in season 1, only to keep his identity a secret and keep the audience guessing for another full season and a few episodes before finally revealing it in the season 2 finale to be Norman all along. But why was this so cleverly done? How was this so perfectly executed? And how did this subvert the expectations of the audience even though everybody already knew Norman was the default Goblin? Norman Osborn in this series was human. And if you guys know me, you know I love my human characters. But what do I mean by the word human characters? Well, I mean a character that has been established that is actually human, thinks like a person, emotes properly and isn't one-dimensional, has a life. A person that has realistic goals given their circumstances, etc. Norman is a human character. We understand that this man has everything to lose. In fact, what makes the final fight scene so poetic is that Norman and Peter are the 2 characters in the show that have the most to lose, and it's implied that whoever loses that fight will lose near enough everything. Norman would go to jail and that he wouldn't be able to raise his son, his company would be handed to someone like Donald Mencken, who we know Norman wasn't very fond of anyway, and his reputation that Norman so dearly cared about would be ruined. If Spider-Man lost, his identity would be leaked to the public, putting Aunt May, Gwen, and the rest of his friends in danger. Harry would also have to put up with the fact that his best friend fought his dad, and not only all of this, Peter would most likely be dead. The Goblin would have killed him. This leads me on very well to my next point. So we've covered that Norman has a clear motive for doing what he is doing. He has a son to raise and protect, so it makes sense why he framed him as the Goblin instead of revealing himself. He doesn't want his company to be taken off of him either, so we know his motive. But what about Norman's sanity? If we look at this situation from an outsider's perspective, it's still kind of messed up that he would frame his own son for the Goblin's doings, but then maybe there's a deeper meaning to Norman's character than we were led on to believe. Norman is psychotic. That's right, I believe it wasn't the green that made him the Green Goblin, but it was himself. It's almost been hinted that the green brings out Norman's inner demons, his psychotic side, in the Green Goblin. But what if? What if Norman was like this normally, but all the anger and rage he stored up inside him when he put the mask on of Norman Osborn every day would be released through the skin of the Green Goblin by night? It's also poetic how much of a symbol masks are in this show. We all know the deal with Spider-Man, Peter Parker, but with Norman, oh, that's a different story. In one of their first confrontations, Norman talks to Spider-Man about masks. He says,
"We all wear masks, Spider-Man. But which one is real? The one that hides your face, or the one that is your face?"
This quote is directed at Spider-Man, but it subtly hints towards Norman's mental state, as it suggests that Norman is trying to tell us that The Green Goblin is his real face, that Norman is the mask, not the Goblin, and it's the green that enhances this. In the final fight, Norman even says that the gaseous forms that he takes the green in only enhances him, not to turn him into a completely different person. This theme of masks is also represented when the chameleon takes off the Norman mask in the helicopter in the last episode. Granted, this is the chameleon, not Norman, but I guess in a way this represents that Norman Osborn as a person is just a mask, and behind that he's plain. The whiteness and lack of expression that the chameleon exhibits could represent the emotionless and psychotic state of Norman Osborn, and his only true self is revealed through the Green Goblin. So Norman is perfectly set up as the Goblin, but how the hell did they subvert our expectations? Well, that's something I struggle answering myself, but I've come to a steady conclusion. They drop little hints throughout the show's run through season 1 and 2 that Norman Osborn quote-unquote never apologizes, and then later on in the series they would contradict that statement when Norman Osborn apologizes to Spider-Man in the final episode, which would lead the audience to believe something fishy was going on if you were observant enough to notice these small little hints towards Norman being something more than he is throughout the 2 seasons. These little details give us the inclination that Norman has to be the Goblin, along with the thought process that he is literally the Green Goblin in every other piece of Spider-Man media. Then they completely disprove all of our expectations when they perfectly match Harry Osborn to the Goblin. We know Harry has been taking the green for football, so it makes sense that he'd black out and potentially wake up as the Goblin and wreak havoc. But as you guys know, Harry in the same episode then disproved this theory of how he could be the Goblin. In the final episode, the spotlight is shone so far away from Norman as the search for the Goblin continues, as we believe that he's been proven innocent. But he hasn't. He's only been proven not guilty, not completely innocent. But as an audience member, we're so focused on trying to figure out who the Goblin is that isn't either Norman or Harry that we forget that the person we first initially thought to be the Goblin was actually the right answer all along, thus subverting our expectations. Our emotions as an audience is expressed through Spider-Man's anger and realization when he says, "You were the Goblin all along." Norman's reveal as the Goblin only elevated when he explained how he pulled off his complex plan, allowing us as an audience to appreciate the character even more for how smart Norman Osborn really is. In a way, the Green Goblin really is the most diverse and complex character in the entire series, and I love it. Thank you guys for watching this video. If you enjoyed, make sure to hit the like button. I really enjoyed doing this video. Spectacular Spider-Man videos always get me. I really love doing these type of ones. If you did enjoy, make sure to hit the like button like I said. Subscribe if you are new, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Peace.